At just 16, Isabella Calloway found herself thrust onto the auction platform in 1885 Kansas by her own father. Little did she know that the rugged Isabella widower, who placed a $25 bid for her indenture, would ultimately reveal to her that her true worth far exceeded any monetary value. From a girl in despair, treated like property, to a woman who would ultimately stand in that very town square, rescuing another child from a similar destiny, Isabella's journey reveals that the deepest betrayals can pave the way for the most surprising forms of redemption. Yet, could the connection between a discarded daughter and a solitary rancher endure when the town's most influential figures deemed their unusual alliance a threat to their beliefs about a woman's role in society? The scream reverberated through the dusty streets of Millbrook, Kansas, yet it was not emitted by any human being. The sound echoed as Isabella Calloway's world shattered, reminiscent of glass colliding with stone. She pressed her nose against the chilly window of Peterson's general store, observing men in tattered hats congregate around the wooden platform in the town square. The autumn breeze of 1885 brought with it murmurs that knotted her swilliamack in ways she couldn't unravel. Once more, a family was parting with their belongings, she murmured to herself, tallying the forlorn expressions among the swelling throng. 3 months without rain had transformed the wheat fields into desolate expanses of brown stalks that crumbled beneath footsteps like ancient bones. The condition of her family's farm was equally disheartening. Their corn had shriveled away, and just 2 weeks prior, their final cow had perished. The store's bell chimed softly as her father entered, a familiar sound that marked his arrival. Levi Calloway's shoulders drooped beneath a burden far more substantial than the vacant grain sacks he typically bore. His gaze met hers in the window's reflection, and for a fleeting instant, she glimpsed something that quickened her heartbeat. Neither love nor protection, but the detached assessment of a man tallying coins that were never there. "It's time to leave, Isabella," he said, his voice gritty and harsh. "Your mother is waiting at home." Yet, as they stepped across the threshold, the essence of home seemed transformed. Grace, her mother, sat at the worn wooden table, her head resting heavily in her hands. 3 wrinkled letters were strewn haphazardly before her. Unpaid bills loomed over them, and debts multiplied daily, much like weeds in a neglected garden. The stillness in their modest home was palpable, almost tangible in its intensity. "We need to talk," Levi said, taking off his hat and placing it on the table with trembling hands. "Concerning what lies ahead, regarding the necessary actions to take." Isabella sensed a chilling presence slither up her like a serpent of frost. Those words had reached her ears before, softly exchanged between her parents in the quiet of the night, believing she was lost in slumber. Discussions that ceased the moment she walked in, eyes that trailed her throughout the home, lingering like shadows she couldn't escape. "The Hendersons are selling their furniture, William Morrow," Grace remarked, her gaze fixed elsewhere. "The Millers have already departed for California. Half the town is getting ready to leave, or—" She paused, unable to complete the thought that lingered in the atmosphere like wisps of smoke from a fading flame. Levi cleared his throat and approached the window, gazing out at the barren fields that had not yielded their promise. "There are alternative approaches to managing debt, methods that don't involve retreating in defeat." "What alternative methods are there?" Isabella inquired, even though a part of her was aware that the response would alter everything. Her father turned around with a deliberate slowness, revealing a stranger who bore the familiar features of her papa, a person who exchanged his affection for his daughter in a desperate bid to preserve his own safety. "A type where kind-hearted individuals support one another. A young woman with strong hands and a solid work ethic seeks her place in the world." The words struck her with unexpected force, despite the softness of his tone. Isabella had witnessed countless auctions to understand his point. She had observed the auction of furniture, horses, and farm tools, all going to the highest bidder. Yet she had also witnessed other occurrences: young men offering their labor for farm work, women accepting roles as housekeepers in return for accommodation and meals. It was permissible, even commendable, yet it felt like suffocating in a mere puddle. "You're discussing the auction," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. Grace finally lifted her gaze, tears carving paths down her soiled cheeks. "It's not eternal, darling. Only for a little while until improvements come. Only until the rains return and we can regain our footing once more. Yet Isabella understood that fairy tales of rain and rescue were mere illusions. At just 16, she bore the marks of hard labor on her hands, a testament to her contributions on the farm. Yet her keen intellect allowed her to grasp the painful reality that her parents prioritized their own survival above her needs. The most painful aspect wasn't the treachery. The moment their eyes lit up with relief as they finally spoke the words was unforgettable. In a flash, Levi declared, as if tearing away a bandage, "Only a year of effort for those in need of assistance. You'll acquire valuable skills, support yourself, and perhaps even set aside some funds for your return home." Residence. The word lingered on her tongue, bitter and reminiscent of ashes. How could she possibly return to a place where her own parents had measured her value against their financial burdens and deemed her insufficient? How could she place her trust in those who had bartered away her future for their own gain? The evening dragged on, heavy and limping, as if it were a creature in pain. Isabella carefully gathered her few possessions into a cloth bundle: her mother's aged Bible, its pages delicate like flower petals, a thimble once cherished by her grandmother, and a pressed wildflower from the last truly beautiful summer they experienced. Every item seemed invaluable now, akin to fragments of a life that was concluding before it had truly started. Her parents attempted to maintain a facade of normalcy, discussing the weather and the neighbors, as if the impending doom of everything they had created together was not looming just around the corner. But Isabella perceived their facade as easily as one sees through crystal-clear water. Each look they exchanged, each meticulously chosen word, each strained smile served only to deepen the wounds of her youth. That evening she rested in her cramped bed, attuned to the wind shaking the loose window shutters. In the far-off expanse, a coyote's mournful howl echoed, a sound so solitary it tugged at her heart. She pondered whether this was the sensation creatures experienced when they detected a snare tightening around them. Fearful, frustrated, yet predominantly exhausted from waging a war they knew was futile. Sleep arrived in fragments, interrupted by visions of being on the auction block, with unfamiliar faces gazing at her as if she were merely another item to be traded and owned. In her dreams, the auction stretched endlessly, voices echoing numbers that dwindled down until, at last, silence reigned with no bids left to be made. As dawn broke, the gentle creaking of wagon wheels echoed along the dirt road outside their home. From her bedroom window, Isabella observed families making their way to town, some burdened with furniture, others guiding livestock, each one displaying a poignant blend of desperate hope and overwhelming shame. Her mother tapped gently on her door. "It's time to prepare, darling." Isabella propped herself up gradually, her body weighed down like drenched fabric. The sunlight pouring through her window felt distinct, more intense, almost frigid, as if it were casting light on the final morning of her previous existence. In just a few hours, she would find herself before unfamiliar faces, awaiting their judgment on her value. As she slipped into her favorite dress, a worn blue cotton that her mother had crafted 2 summers prior, a spark of something intense and radiant ignited within her chest. Perhaps her parents had lost hope in her, but that certainly didn't imply she should lose hope in herself. The wooden platform gave the impression of being atop an unexcavated grave. Isabella focused intently on a crack in the boards beneath her feet, counting the splinters to steer clear of the familiar faces in the crowd, many of whom she had known since childhood: Mrs. Henderson from the bakery, old William Miller who operated the blacksmith shop, families who had smiled and waved at her just the week before. Now they gazed with the discerning eyes of shoppers at a marketplace, assessing her value in currency and change. Auctioneer Jake Owen ascended next to her, his belly protruding over his belt like a heavy sack of grain. For 15 years, he had been in the business of selling others' possessions, yet Isabella sensed that this was a source of discomfort for him as well. His typically powerful voice emerged softer than usual, as if he felt a sense of shame about the words he needed to express. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Isabella Calloway," he started, clearing his throat twice. At 16 years old, strong as an ox, having worked on her family's farm since she could walk, seeking a 1-year position for household work, farm chores, or anything that needs to be done. The audience swayed and whispered, reminiscent of grains swaying in a gentle breeze. Isabella noticed her parents positioned at the rear, her mother gripping her father's arm with such intensity that her knuckles turned pale. Levi avoided her gaze, while Grace wept softly, silent tears streaming down her face and falling onto the dusty earth. "The opening bid is set at $5 for the year," Owen declared, lifting his wooden hammer high. "Am I hearing 5? Silence lingered, taut and ready to break. Isabella's cheeks flushed with embarrassment as the seconds passed in silence, each moment heavy with unspoken words. She seemed to hold less value than their old milk cow, it appeared, even less than the broken plow they had sold the previous month, less than $5. A voice emerged from the heart of the crowd. Isabella was unable to identify the speaker, yet a tumultuous blend of relief and horror surged through her. There was a flicker of desire for her, even if it was just a whisper. "I received 5. Am I hearing 7? Owen's voice gained momentum now that the ice had been shattered. 7. This time it was Marcus Whitfield, the son of a banker. His blonde hair was slicked back, overly shiny from the excessive pomade. He grinned when he noticed her gaze, and there was something in that grin that sent a shiver down her spine, as if ants were parading across her skin. $7. Am I hearing 10? $10. Mrs. Chloe, the proprietor of the boarding house, lifted her hand. She was recognized for her relentless work ethic, demanding long hours from her helpers while compensating them just enough to get by. Yet she was still a woman. At least Isabella could find some safety in that place. The auction progressed with modest increments, 12, 15, 18. Every digit seemed to tighten the grip on her destiny. Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that she wanted Mrs. Chloe to come out on top, even with her well-known reputation for being tough. It's preferable to face the harshness of a woman than to endure the unsettling gaze of certain men in the crowd, their stares twisting her swilliamachi in discomfort. $20! A voice she didn't recognize shouted. The crowd shifted just enough for her to see the man who had spoken for the first time. He lingered at the rear, tall and slender, his dark hair in need of a trim and his attire showing signs of wear. His face bore the marks of time, etched with deep lines around his eyes that told tales of a life filled with struggles and profound losses. $20 to the gentleman in the brown coat, Owen declared. Am I hearing 25? Whitfield lifted his hand once more, his grin expanding into something increasingly unsettling. $22. The unknown figure. She believed she had spotted him in town, yet his name eluded her, prompting her to take a small step forward. As he spoke, his voice resonated with a gentle, melodic lilt, reminiscent of someone hailing from distant lands beyond Kansas. $25. There was an unmistakable quality in his tone that hushed the crowd, not harsh or menacing, but solid and unwavering, as definitive as the sound of a door shutting. Whitfield parted his lips to raise his bid, but hesitated as he locked eyes with the stranger's unwavering stare. $25 going once, Owen announced, scanning the crowd for any additional bidders. Sold to the highest bidder. Isabella held her breath, a flicker of hope mingling with a deep-seated fear as she awaited the next bid, torn between longing for participation and dread of the outcome. The stranger's gaze lacked the usual hunger or calculation that she had come to expect from others. His eyes conveyed a unique depth, perhaps sadness or a sense of understanding, as if he truly grasped the weight of her situation. Sold to Matthias Brennan for $25, Owen declared, bringing his hammer down with a decisive crack that resonated through every building in the square. Matthias Brennan. Now she recalled the name being murmured in discussions that fell silent whenever she approached. The Isabella widower, residing on a cattle ranch beyond the town's borders. A man who had suffered the loss of his wife and child to fever 3 years prior, remaining largely absent from public view since that tragic event. Some people claimed that sorrow had pushed him to the brink of madness. Some asserted he was as cruel as a rattlesnake and doubly perilous. As he approached the platform to finalize their transaction, Isabella noticed an unexpected expression on his face. Not madness or malice, but a profound weariness that resonated with her own. It was as if he comprehended the weight of having one's life disrupted by uncontrollable circumstances. Owen passed him the documents that designated her as his responsibility for the upcoming year. She demonstrates strong work ethic, Brennan. Robust physique, eager to work. She won't cause you any issues. Matthias carefully folded the papers and slid them into his coat pocket, his gaze fixed elsewhere. Instead, he examined Isabella's face with eyes reminiscent of turbulent skies. "What do they call you, lass?" "Isabella," she whispered, taken aback by his question. Most buyers likely wouldn't pay attention to her name until it became necessary to reach out to her for work-related matters. "Isabella," he echoed, as if he were gauging its resonance. "That's the name of a flower. My beloved wife had a deep affection for flowers." Before she had the chance to reply, he pivoted to face the crowd, his voice resonating powerfully throughout the square. "If anyone has any concerns regarding this arrangement, feel free to approach me directly. However, I want to make it clear that this girl will be treated with the utmost respect in my home. Anyone who proposes a different viewpoint may end up having to justify their worries to my fists." A whisper swept across the crowd, akin to a gentle breeze rustling through the blades of grass. Several expressed their agreement with a nod. Others appeared surprised by his straightforwardness. Whitfield's face flushed a deep crimson, yet he remained silent. Matthias turned back to Isabella and extended his hand, not to seize her or guide her as if she were an object, but to present her with the option to accept it or decline. "Are you prepared to head back, my dear?" "Residence." The word still stung, yet when it came from him, it carried a different weight altogether. Not as if it were a destination imposed upon her, but rather a space where she could genuinely find her place. She grasped his hand, taken aback by the softness of his roughened fingers, and allowed him to assist her in descending from the platform. Her parents finally drew near from behind. Her mother extended her arms as if to embrace her in farewell, yet Isabella took a step back. Some wounds were too raw for contact. "Look after our girl," Levi told Matthias, his voice heavy with feelings he had no claim to possess. Matthias regarded him with a gaze as frigid as a winter dawn. "She became my responsibility the moment you placed her on that platform. Don't anticipate her presence until the year has passed, if she decides to meet you at that time." The words struck Levi with the force of a physical blow, yet he chose not to contest them. How was he able to do that? He had made his decision when he chose to put his daughter up for auction. Now he must face the repercussions of his actions. As they approached Matthias's wagon, Isabella noticed the crowd starting to thin out behind them. Life in Millbrook would continue as though nothing had transpired, as if the future of a 16-year-old girl hadn't just been traded away like a mere commodity, as though families weren't shattered daily by despair and drought, and aspirations that faded into the dust. Yet for Isabella, the world had transformed completely. She had ceased to be the daughter of Levi and Grace Calloway. For the upcoming year, she was under the control of Matthias Brennan, an unfamiliar man who had exchanged $25 for the power to determine her destiny. The sole inquiry remaining was whether he had acquired a servant or rescued a soul. As the wagon pulled away from the only town she had ever known, Isabella felt a stirring within her, a sense of impending discovery. The horses came to an abrupt halt, causing Isabella to almost be thrown from the wagon seat. Yet it wasn't due to the fact that they had arrived at their goal. An enormous oak tree lay across the dirt road, its trunk as thick as a house and its branches extending like the arms of a giant. A bolt of lightning had cleaved it perfectly in two, likely during the storm of the previous week, and now it obstructed their way entirely. "That's quite the predicament," Matthias murmured, descending to inspect the hindrance. The tree loomed large, far beyond the capacity of two individuals to shift. To circumvent it would entail navigating treacherous terrain, a path likely to shatter a wagon wheel or injure a horse. Isabella observed him traverse the expanse of the colossal tree, his seasoned hands probing various areas as if searching for a vulnerable point. The afternoon sun blazed overhead, relentless in its intensity, and she sensed the sweat pooling beneath her arms, a stark contrast to the October chill that lingered in the atmosphere. After 2 hours on the road, she found herself uncertain about how much longer the journey would last. "Is it possible for us to move beyond this?" she inquired, taken aback by the unexpected normalcy of her voice. Inside, her swillia match was twisting in knots, yet she was resolute in masking any fear from the stranger who now held her destiny in their hands. "Not with the wagon," he said, removing his hat to dab at his forehead. "However, I am aware of an alternative approach. An ancient mining trail stretches about a mile back, guiding the way to my home. The journey may be challenging, yet it will lead us home before nightfall." "Welcome home," That word slipped from his lips once more, as if it were the most effortless expression imaginable. Isabella examined his profile while he maneuvered the horses, searching for any hints of the cruelty or madness that the townspeople gossiped about. All she saw was a man who appeared weary to his core, as if he had been shouldering a burdensome weight for far too long. The mining trail revealed itself as merely two grooves etched into the hillside, shaped by the passage of wagon wheels and the relentless forces of nature. The horses labored intensely, their breaths coming in heavy bursts as they strained to pull the wagon up steep inclines and navigate sharp curves that made Isabella's heart race. Yet Matthias grasped the reins with unwavering assurance, murmuring gently to the creatures when the journey became challenging. "Have you ever traveled this route before?" he inquired as they reached the summit of a notably steep hill. "Absolutely not, sir," Isabella responded, her gaze fixed on the vast sea of prairie grass that extended endlessly to the horizon in all directions. She had spent her entire life in Millbrook, and the furthest she had ever ventured was to the county fair in Dodge City. This untamed land seemed like a completely different realm. "Please refrain from calling me sir," Matthias stated with conviction. "I am Matthias, and that is the name you will refer to me by. I am not your master, my dear. I am your boss." The distinction appeared significant to him, although Isabella was uncertain if she grasped the difference just yet. She had been acquired and compensated for, just like any other asset. Yet there was a quality in his voice that suggested he perceived the world in a unique way. They traveled in a serene quietude for some time, the wagon wheels producing a gentle cadence as they meandered through a landscape that became increasingly picturesque with every passing mile. Wildflowers scattered across the grassland, resembling vibrant splashes of paint on a canvas, purple asters, yellow goldenrod, and the final courageous blooms of summer still holding on against the encroaching autumn. "What about your family?" Matthias asked abruptly, pulling her from her reverie. Isabella experienced a constricting sensation in her chest. "What information are you seeking? Anything you feel comfortable sharing? Have they always been engaged in farming?" The inquiry appeared harmless, prompting her to respond. "My father inherited the land from his own father. In 1862, Grandpa Calloway constructed the house using his own hands. Ma arrived from Missouri when she wed Pa. They envisioned grand aspirations for turning the farm into a thriving success." "So did they?" "Ensure its success, I mean." Isabella chuckled, yet the sound held no trace of amusement. "There were times in my childhood that were filled with joy and happiness. Abundant rainfall, thriving harvests, sufficient funds for new attire, and occasionally a sweet treat from the general store. Yet the past 3 years lingered in her mind, a painful journey she hesitated to recount, culminating in her presence on that auction platform. "The drought has taken a toll on all of us," Matthias remarked softly. "My cattle operation just managed to pull through. I lost half of my herd last summer when the creek ran dry." This marked the initial genuine insight he had revealed about his own life. Isabella meticulously tucked it away. A rancher who had suffered losses of livestock due to the relentless drought. This clarified his need for assistance and his ability to invest in her expertise. However, it also implied that he could be facing financial difficulties, potentially leading to a life of toil and scarcity. The sun dipped low in the western sky as they crested a ridge, revealing to Isabella her new home for the coming year. The Brennan Ranch lay before them, resembling a scene straight out of a storybook. A charming farmhouse boasting a wraparound porch, a vibrant red barn that appeared newly painted, and serene pastures where cattle grazed contentedly. The place was unassuming yet cared for, indicating an owner who valued his property despite facing challenges. "It's stunning," she whispered, and she truly felt it. Matthias looked at her, his expression hinting at a flicker of astonishment. "Do you really believe that?" "It pales in comparison to some of the larger offerings in the region." "It resembles a genuine home," Isabella remarked, reflecting on her family's dilapidated farmhouse with its dripping roof and shattered shutters, as if those who reside there truly value it. They arrived at the house just as the initial stars started to twinkle in the deepening twilight. Matthias assisted her as she stepped down from the wagon, his touch gentle and considerate before taking hold of her modest bundle of belongings. "Feeling a bit peckish?" he inquired as they ascended the porch steps. "Absolutely, sir." "Indeed, Matthias." The name rolled off her tongue oddly, too well known for someone she had only just encountered. He grinned at her correction, the first genuine smile she had ever witnessed from him. It reshaped his entire visage, wiping away years of struggle and unveiling the man he could have been had sorrow and loss not etched their marks upon him. Excellent. This morning I prepared a hearty stew before heading into town. It ought to remain warm. Once more, the interior of the house took her by surprise. She had anticipated a bachelor pad with dirty dishes piled up, beds left unmade, and clothes strewn about haphazardly. Instead, she discovered rooms that were neat and orderly, though a bit minimalistic. The furnishings were unpretentious yet expertly made, with each item positioned just so. She noted the tidiness of the house as she placed her bundle by the door. "It's a habit I picked up during my military days," Matthias said, as he filled 2 bowls with stew. My wife would chuckle about it, remarking that I folded my socks as if I were getting ready for an inspection. It was the first time he had brought up his deceased wife, and Isabella felt uncertain about how to react. The anguish in his voice remained vivid, even after all the time that had gone by, akin to a scar that appeared mended yet continued to throb within. They dined in a cozy quiet, the stew enveloping her in warmth from within. It surpassed anything her mother had prepared in ages, rich with vegetables and succulent meat, infused with herbs that tantalized her taste buds. As she completed her meal, Matthias took the initiative to refill her bowl, doing so without any prompt. "Thank you," she expressed, conveying a sentiment that extended beyond the meal itself. He nodded, grasping the unspoken feelings she struggled to express. He rose and made his way to a small desk tucked in the corner, coming back with the documents that would legally tie her to him for the next year. "Please take a moment to read this," he said, placing the contract before her. Isabella gazed at the document, her confusion deepening with each passing moment. Rather than the severe conditions she had anticipated, regulations regarding working hours, consequences for defiance, limitations on her freedom of movement, she discovered something completely unexpected. The agreement specified sensible working hours, equitable treatment, sufficient food and shelter, and a modest payment to be given upon the completion of her service. She confessed that this was not what she had anticipated. "What were your expectations?" "To be regarded as an object, as if you were merely a possession." Matthias reclined in his chair, a grave look on his face. "I have something to share with you, Isabella Calloway. Having witnessed the depths of slavery and bondage, I understand that the act of owning another person ravages the spirit of both the master and the enslaved. Your presence here is a result of the difficult decision your parents had to make, and I find myself in a position to offer financial assistance. However, you do not belong to me. You are an essential part of this ranch, working alongside me to ensure everything operates smoothly. If you ever sense that you're not being treated with the respect you deserve as a human being, please let me know right away." The words struck her with an undeniable impact, causing tears to well up in her eyes that she quickly blinked away. She had never been addressed regarding the concepts of respect and dignity. Her feelings had never been acknowledged, nor had anyone ever indicated that she had the right to voice her own thoughts. "Now," Matthias continued, "allow me to guide you to your room. Tomorrow, we will begin to explore ways to make this collaboration successful." Collaboration. As Isabella ascended the narrow stairs to a small yet tidy bedroom that would belong to her alone, she pondered whether being sold at auction could indeed become the best thing that had ever happened to her. The rooster's crow at dawn served as Isabella's initial signal that this day would challenge all her assumptions about her new life. Yet, she found herself lost in the patterns of the ceiling, contemplating whether the warmth of the previous night had been merely a figment of her imagination. Sunlight poured into her bedroom, casting a warm glow on the dust motes that twirled like delicate little spirits. In that fleeting instant, she lost track of her surroundings. Suddenly, the truth surged forth. The bidding, the journey by wagon, the agreement that offered collaboration rather than servitude. A sudden knock on her door broke the silence of her contemplation. "Isabella? Are you awake, my dear?" "Indeed, Matthias?" She dialed, hastily slipping into the same dress she had worn the day before, the only decent one in her wardrobe. "Your breakfast awaits. Just say the word. Then I will guide you through the area." The kitchen was filled with the rich aroma of coffee and bacon, evoking memories of happier days when her family enjoyed such indulgences. Matthias arranged the table for 2. honoring her presence as if she were a cherished guest, rather than just someone employed to assist. As she settled in to enjoy her meal, a realization struck her, causing a tight knot of anxiety to form in her swilliamack. Each plate held merely 2 strips of bacon, and the coffee was so weak it was almost transparent. "Is this everything we have to eat?" she inquired, making an effort to maintain a nonchalant tone. Matthias halted, his coffee cup suspended in midair, just shy of his lips. "At this moment, I plan to head into town for some supplies next week." However, Isabella had been raised in a home where finances were consistently constrained, and she was keenly aware of the indicators of someone pushing their resources to the limit. The bacon was paper-thin, the coffee lacked depth, and there was a conspicuous absence of bread or eggs, essentials that ought to have been abundant on a functioning ranch. Following breakfast, Matthias took her outside to start what he referred to as her training in ranch management. The morning air was fresh and invigorating, infused with the aroma of grass and livestock, along with an undercurrent of something ominous on the horizon. Their initial destination was the barn, where she anticipated finding the tools and equipment essential for managing a thriving cattle operation. Instead, she discovered largely vacant stalls and an assortment of tools that had clearly experienced more prosperous times. The hayloft stood almost empty, and the feed bins contained just enough grain to last a few days. "What is the number of cattle in your possession?" she inquired, her apprehension about the response growing stronger. 47 head, Matthias replied, avoiding her gaze. It was once nearly 200 prior to the drought. The figures simply didn't align. 47 cattle simply couldn't sustain a ranch of this magnitude, particularly with winter approaching. Isabella had been raised in the midst of farming and ranching families, and she understood that an operation of this size was merely scraping by, not flourishing. As they strolled through the meadows, she observed the remaining cattle more closely. They appeared healthy, yet they were lean, lacking the sturdy build one would expect from animals thriving on lush pastures. The fences required attention in multiple areas, and a few of the gates were askew on their hinges. "Matthias," she inquired with caution, "are we facing financial difficulties?" He halted his steps and pivoted to confront her, his face a mask of ambiguity. For an extended moment they lingered in the heart of the pasture, the wind whispering through the grass that surrounded them. "We," he finally stated. "You mentioned this was a collaboration." Collaborators exchange challenges alongside rewards. A spark danced in his gaze, perhaps astonishment or admiration. "Indeed, we find ourselves in a difficult situation. I invested the majority of my savings in breeding stock, only to lose them to the drought. The bank possesses the mortgage for the ranch, and I find myself overdue on payments. I placed a bid on your contract out of necessity," yet there was also a hint of embarrassment in his demeanor as he trailed off. "Why is that?" "I couldn't bear the thought of another young person being sold to someone who could cause them harm. I understand the feeling of being in a place of deep longing and isolation." The confession lingered in the atmosphere, a delicate span neither dared to traverse. Isabella sensed a change in her perception of their circumstances. Matthias didn't seek her services out of success or a need to manage his wealth. He saved her because he recalled the feeling of needing to be saved himself. "What are our next steps?" she inquired. "We create. We strive to endure the winter while safeguarding the ranch. We look forward to more favorable outcomes in the coming year. That lacks substance." Matthias chuckled, the sound tinged with a hint of desperation rather than genuine amusement. "Absolutely not. Yet it's everything I possess." The remainder of the morning was dedicated to crafting a more effective strategy. Isabella demonstrated a keen intellect for practical issues, proposing methods to optimize their resources and enhance the ranch's efficiency. She possessed the skills to preserve food, mend equipment rather than replace it, and stretch a little bit of everything into something much more substantial. As they sat on the porch enjoying their lunch of bread and butter, she proposed selling some of the furniture in the house, a thought lingering until their next trip to town. The elegant table in the dining room could fetch a handsome price. "That table was my wife's," Matthias said softly. "Then we shall discover another product to market. What's the story behind that old wagon tucked away behind the barn? The one that has a damaged wheel? Do you believe there would be any interest in purchasing it? William Miller is constantly on the hunt for components to repair other wagons. He could possibly offer us a small amount for it." As the afternoon progressed, Isabella started to gain a clearer understanding of their circumstances. Matthias had placed a bid on her contract not merely from a sense of goodwill but from a place of urgent need. He sought assistance, yet he yearned for optimism, a companion to help shoulder the weight of rescuing a struggling ranch. The understanding should have filled her with fear. Instead, it enveloped her in a sensation she hadn't experienced in months. Objective. For the first time since her parents had chosen to auction her future, she sensed a glimmer of control over what lay ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Matthias remarked, "There's another matter we need to address. I haven't spent much time in town recently. Some people may cause you difficulties if they notice you are with me." Isabella sensed a knot forming in her swilliamack. What sort of trouble? Conversations happen. They observe a man residing with a young woman, and they jump to conclusions. Some of those assumptions might pose risks for both of us. She grasped the unspoken words behind his silence. In a quaint town such as Millbrook, one's standing held immense significance. The presence of a single man and an unmarried woman cohabitating could ignite rumors that might jeopardize their prospects for a stable and respectable future. "What actions should we take in response?" she inquired. "We exercise caution. We ensure that there's no room for discussion. We trust that our deeds will resonate more profoundly than the doubts of others." Yet, as he spoke, Isabella noticed a flicker of concern in his eyes. She was starting to realize that their issues ran far deeper than just finances, livestock, and the lack of rain. They were engaged in a struggle against poverty and bias, confronting the narrow-mindedness of a small town that perceived scandal where there was none. That night, as she lay in her narrow bed, the distant howls of coyotes filled the air, and Isabella understood that her year of service would unfold in ways neither of them had anticipated. Her efforts extended beyond merely settling her parents' financial obligations. She was determined to rescue a ranch, safeguard her reputation, and demonstrate that two individuals in need could create something greater together than they could achieve on their own. The inquiry revolved around their strength to prevail, or if the opposing forces would obliterate all they endeavored to create. William Morrow would unveil fresh challenges, new trials for their unexpected alliance. Yet this evening, for the very first time since her parents had shattered her trust, Isabella sensed that she had discovered a space where she genuinely fit in. The gunshots shattered the morning calm like a clap of thunder, causing every bird within a mile to take flight in a frantic escape. Isabella felt a sudden shift, realizing that their tranquil days had come to an end. She let the bucket of chicken feed slip from her grasp and sprinted toward the noise, her heart pounding fiercely against her chest, as if a wild creature were desperate to break free. Behind the barn, she discovered Matthias, looming over the lifeless form of a calf, his rifle still exhaling wisps of smoke in his grip. The young creature lay contorted in the grass, its neck positioned at an unnatural angle. Yet it wasn't the vision of death that sent a chill through Isabella's veins. Matthias's face was a canvas of unbridled fury. "They poisoned the water," he murmured, his tone chillingly calm. "Something has been placed in the creek that supplies water to the south pasture. This tiny creature consumed it and—" He waved his hand in despair at the lifeless calf, words failing him completely. Isabella knelt beside the creature, her hands trembling as she scrutinized its foam-flecked mouth and bulging eyes. She had encountered poisoned livestock previously, amidst a conflict between adjacent farms in Missouri. The indications were clear and filled with dread. "Who could possibly commit such an act?" she murmured softly. "Someone who wishes for our departure," Matthias responded, his gaze sweeping the horizon as though anticipating the arrival of our foes. "Someone who believes they can force us away from our rightful territory." The following hours unfolded in a whirlwind of intense action. The remaining cattle were relocated to the northern pasture, positioned as far away from the contaminated water as feasible. Matthias ventured to the creek to explore, while Isabella meticulously examined each animal for any indications of illness. By noon, they had discovered 2 additional lifeless calves and ailing cow that was unlikely to endure the day. "This is war," Matthias declared upon his return from the scouting mission. His expression was somber, and his boots were caked with mud from trudging through the creek. "Arsenic was carelessly dumped into the water upstream from our property, posing a lethal threat to every head of cattle we own." Isabella sensed the ground shift unsteadily beneath her. 47 cattle represented their lifeline, the sole beacon of hope for enduring the winter and settling the mortgage. Devoid of the group, they were left with emptiness. In a situation more dire than one could imagine, they found themselves burdened with debts beyond their means and adversaries eager to see their downfall. "Is it possible to establish who was responsible?" she inquired, even though she had a hunch about what the response would be. "Demonstrating it and understanding it are not the same," Matthias remarked with a shadowy tone. "I have a strong suspicion about who is responsible for this, but suspicions alone won't stand in a courtroom." The afternoon was consumed by the laborious task of burying the dead animals, a grueling endeavor that left them both weary and covered in dirt. Yet amidst their efforts, Isabella observed a glimmer of hope that sparked within her. Matthias refused to back down. In the face of adversity, he continued to discuss future actions, strategies for resistance, and the process of restoring what had been taken from them. "We must inform Doc Chloe," he remarked as they completed the final grave. "He can officially test the water, ensuring it becomes part of the record, and we will assign guards to the remaining cattle until we confirm their safety." "Sentinels?" Isabella surveyed the vast, desolate prairie stretching out before her. "It's only us, Matthias. What strategies can we employ to protect 44 head of cattle over vast stretches of land? We alternate, rest in intervals, and do whatever is necessary to safeguard what remains." As dusk settled in, they lingered on the porch, sharing a simple meal of beans and cornbread, when a figure emerged on the horizon. Isabella felt a tightness in her swilliamac as she spotted the figure of Sheriff Coleman, his badge shimmering in the dwindling sunlight as he made his way toward their home. "Evening, Brennan," Coleman called out, dismounting with the measured pace of someone who anticipated no warm reception. "I heard there were some issues with your livestock." Matthias placed his plate aside and rose to his feet. His hand lay nonchalantly on the rifle leaning against the porch railing. "In a small town, information spreads quickly." "Absolutely." Coleman's gaze roamed across the ranch, absorbing each nuance. "Would you mind sharing what occurred?" "Someone has poisoned our water supply," Isabella declared before Matthias could respond. "3 of our cattle were lost and 1 more has fallen ill." The sheriff's eyes turned toward her, and she caught a glimpse of something unsettling flash across his face. "That's quite a grave allegation, miss. Do you have any evidence?" "We've got lifeless creatures and tainted water," Matthias responded. "What additional evidence could possibly be required? The type that holds its ground in a courtroom. The type that identifies individuals and includes testimonies." Coleman tilted his hat, a move that effortlessly blended nonchalance with an undercurrent of menace. "I've come across some intriguing tales about this location, concerning the setup you have in place." Isabella sensed a flush creeping up her cheeks, yet she steeled herself to hold the sheriff's gaze. "What type of narratives?" "The sort that leaves good people questioning whether everything is in order and legitimate. A solitary man shares his space with a young woman, without a guide. No relatives close by to watch over things." Coleman's smile carried the chill of a January breeze. "Some people believe that you both might be pretending to manage a ranch rather than actually doing it." The accusation lingered ominously, suffocating the atmosphere around it. Isabella's hands tightened into fists, fury bubbling in her throat like a noxious substance. She had anticipated this moment. Matthias had cautioned her about the whispers that circulate in small towns, yet hearing it voiced felt like a sharp blow to her senses. "My arrangement with Miss Calloway is entirely legitimate and appropriate," Matthias stated, his tone ominously calm. "She works for me, neither more nor less." "Is that really the case?" Coleman's gaze flickered between them, calculating and predatory, as if deciding which target to seize first. "In that case, I hope you don't mind if I pose a few questions to her, in a discreet manner." "In fact, I would mind," Isabella remarked, moving nearer to Matthias. "Feel free to ask anything you'd like, and we'll both be here to respond." The sheriff's face clouded over. "Madam, I am endeavoring to safeguard your standing in this matter. Your situation raises some significant concerns. I'm in a position where I'm putting in hard work for fair compensation," Isabella stated, her voice gaining strength with every word. "If individuals choose to interpret that in a negative light, it reflects more on their character than on mine." Coleman observed her intently, for a prolonged moment before redirecting his attention to Matthias. "Well, Brennan, It appears you found yourself quite the talkative character. I trust she will justify the challenges she may bring your way. She's worth 10 of those who are spreading lies about us, Matthias said confidently. The sheriff chuckled, yet the sound held no trace of amusement. We'll find out soon enough. In the meantime, I suggest you both exercise caution. Misfortunes tend to befall those who struggle to find their place in this environment. Once Coleman had ridden off, Isabella and Matthias remained quiet on the porch, observing the sun descend toward the horizon. The warning had been issued, courteous, yet clear. They felt the weight of scrutiny, the harsh gaze of those who held the power to dismantle their very existence. Isabella finally revealed that he's collaborating with the one who contaminated the water. I understand. What are our next steps? Matthias remained silent for an extended period, gazing out at the pasture where their few cattle fed as the evening shadows deepened. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a gentle strength. We engage in battle. We meticulously record every detail, collect proof, and compel them to confront us openly, rather than lurking in the shadows like the timid they are. We ensure there are no grounds for them to claim we're not managing our home effectively. What is the significance of that? It signifies that we pay close attention to how things look. Meals will no longer be enjoyed in solitude. Gone are the days of lingering on the porch once the sun sets. We provide no fodder for gossip, only the fruits of our diligent efforts and integrity in our daily lives. The words pierced her, despite Isabella understanding their necessity. The effortless camaraderie they had been cultivating, the feeling of collaboration and mutual intent. Everything must now be concealed, relinquished to the narrow-minded and harsh words of those who cannot bear to witness the triumph of others. As she gazed at Matthias's profile in the dimming light, a quiet vow formed within her. They sought to dismantle the foundation she and Matthias had painstakingly created together. They sought to tear them asunder with deceit, malice, and intimidation. They had chosen the wrong girl to provoke. Flame. Isabella's voice erupted from her throat as she flung open the kitchen door at 3 a.m. Her nightgown was charred, and her face bore the marks of soot. The barn erupted in flames, illuminating the dark sky like a colossal beacon, with fire leaping 40 feet high and transforming the night into a nightmarish orange glow. Matthias sprinted toward the raging flames, hastily tugging on his boots as he navigated the yard in a frantic rush. The heat enveloped them like a tangible barrier, compelling them to cover their faces as they approached the scene of the calamity unfolding before their eyes. Their hay stores, their equipment, their winter feed, everything was consumed by the flames. The equines! Matthias yelled above the deafening crackle of the fire. They remain within. Isabella, acting on instinct, seized a bucket from the well and drenched herself with water before hastening after him toward the blazing structure. The smoke enveloped her, heavy and suffocating, while the intense heat threatened to sear her skin. Yet amidst the chaos, she could discern the frantic whinnies of the animals ensnared within. Matthias forcefully swung the barn door open, unleashing a wave of scorching air that sent them both reeling back. Amidst the swirling smoke and crackling flames, the horses could be seen thrashing in their stalls, consumed by a wild panic. The timber framework moaned and squeaked above, poised to give way at any instant. "You take the mare!" Matthias yelled, tossing his shirt over his head. "I will retrieve the gelding." They dove into the flames as one, driven by an instinctual urgency and a fierce determination. Isabella approached the mare's stall, her fingers trembling as she struggled with the latch, the mechanism proving difficult to manage in her unsteady grip. The horse was engulfed in fear, thrashing with her hooves and rolling her eyes until only the whites were visible. "Take it easy, girl," Isabella murmured, striving to maintain her composure amidst the turmoil surrounding them. "We're going to help you escape from this place." She succeeded in opening the stall door just as a flaming beam fell where she had been moments earlier. The mare surged ahead, racing toward the door, while Isabella trailed behind, gasping for breath amid the smoke and tripping over the scattered wreckage. Behind her, she could hear Matthias grappling with the gelding, muttering curses in what seemed to be Isabella as the creature resisted being saved. They erupted from the barn just as the roof started to collapse, pulling the horses to safety while flaming debris rained down around them. The mare bore burns on her flanks, while the gelding limped painfully, yet they still drew breath. That was certainly a greater value than anything else they had kept in the barn. "Water!" Matthias exclaimed. gesturing urgently toward the well. We must prevent it from reaching the house. For the next 2 hours, they engaged in a desperate struggle against the encroaching flames. With buckets and worn blankets in hand, they successfully thwarted the flames from advancing to the house, yet the barn succumbed entirely to the blaze. As the first light of dawn illuminated the Kansas prairie, only a heap of charred remnants and contorted metal lingered. Isabella fell onto the porch steps, her nightgown stained and her hands raw from gripping the hot bucket handles. Every part of her ached, her lungs, her eyes, her throat. But the physical agony paled in comparison to the profound sorrow that weighed heavily on her heart. They had lost all the essentials required to endure the winter. Their hay, their tools, their grain stores were all gone. "This wasn't an accident," Matthias said, his voice raspy from the smoke filling his lungs. He meticulously scrutinized the remnants of the barn, prodding the rubble with a stick. "Take a moment to observe this." He presented her with a length of rope, charred in places yet still identifiable. It was drenched in kerosene, facilitating the rapid spread of flames throughout the structure. A barn had been set on fire with intent, the act carefully planned for the dead of night when its owners lay unaware and vulnerable. Isabella stated, almost as if it were a given, that the very individuals responsible for poisoning the water had to be the same ones. "They are intensifying, becoming more audacious." Matthias cast the rope into the ashes, his expression shadowed by fury. "Initially they attempted to eliminate our livestock, and now they are striving to eradicate us entirely." Just as Isabella was about to reply, the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats drew near. A band of riders approached swiftly along the road, their speed stirring up a swirling cloud of dust behind them. As they approached, she began to recognize familiar faces, with Sheriff Coleman at the forefront, accompanied by Marcus Whitfield and a few other townsmen. Coleman called out as he dismounted, "Heard you had some excitement last night." His tone was relaxed, almost upbeat, as if he were chatting about the weather rather than a catastrophe that had come perilously close to taking their lives. "Our barn was burned down," Matthias stated without emotion. "Ruined all that we had prepared for the winter season." "That's unfortunate," Whitfield remarked, yet his grin implied he didn't truly feel that way. "It's fortunate that you and the girl managed to escape. You could have perished in your sleep." The manner in which he referred to the girl sent a shiver down Isabella's spine, as if she were something disgraceful, something unworthy of a name or even the simplest form of respect. She straightened her posture, locking eyes with him, trying to maintain as much dignity as possible despite her singed nightgown and the soot that covered her. "We were fortunate," she remarked with an icy tone. This time, Coleman stepped down and strolled around the remnants of the barn, putting on a performance of scrutinizing the surroundings. "Do you have any thoughts on how it all began?" "It was set by someone," Matthias remarked. "Rope drenched in kerosene was discovered." "Oh, really?" The sheriff's tone carried a hint of doubt. "It might have been an accident." A lantern tumbles. A spark ignites from a cigarette. These aged barns ignite quickly once they take flame. "We don't smoke, and we're cautious with lanterns," Isabella exclaimed, her frustration reaching its peak. "There was an intention to extinguish our spirit, and we are all aware of the culprit." The men shared a look, and she noticed a silent communication unfold between them. A glimmer of contentment, as if they were delighted by the success of their scheme. "That's quite a grave allegation, miss," Coleman remarked. "Do you have any evidence?" "The same evidence you'd require if it were your barn that had gone up in flames," Matthias responded. "In other words, absolutely none. Yet we are both aware that this was no mere coincidence." Whitfield advanced, wearing a facade of feigned worry. "Perhaps, Brennan, it's time to consider letting go of what isn't working for you. This land appears to be under a curse, doesn't it? First came the drought, followed by the poisoned water, and now we face the fire. Perhaps there's a message waiting for you to uncover. Perhaps someone is attempting to force us off our own land," Isabella retorted. "Perhaps they believe they can intimidate us into relinquishing what is rightfully ours. Or perhaps," Coleman suggested softly, "they aim to shield the community from undesirable influences." The words lingered in the atmosphere, evoking a sense of defiance. Isabella's cheeks flushed with a mix of shame and fury, yet she compelled herself to maintain her posture with confidence. She understood the implications, that she and Matthias were seen as living in sin, that their relationship was viewed as tainted or unethical. "There's nothing distasteful about genuine effort and shared respect," she declared, her voice resonating across the yard like a chime. "If you're unable to recognize that, it reflects more on you than on us." Coleman's expression grew somber. "Your words are quite pointed, my dear. It would be wise to consider their impact." Matthias moved to stand beside her, noting her keen intellect. "Indeed, she is correct. We are standing firm in our position, and we have no intention of moving from it." "Is that really the case?" Whitfield's smile was as frigid as a winter breeze. "We'll just have to wait and see. At times, the market takes the reins and determines the outcomes for us." He retrieved a creased piece of paper from his coat pocket and passed it to Matthias. "The bank has requested repayment of your loan, Brennan. All payments must be completed by the end of the month or foreclosure will occur. It seems they've concluded that you're too great a risk." Isabella observed the hue fade from Matthias's complexion as he perused the document. The bank insisted on the prompt settlement of the full mortgage amount, funds that were beyond their reach and utterly unattainable within such a limited time frame. The ranch received its fate, articulated with meticulous legal clarity. "You can't do this," she whispered. Coleman responded, "Indeed we can. Everything is above board and in accordance with the law. It's purely professional." "It's revenge," Matthias murmured, his voice teetering on the edge of restraint. "Clear and straightforward. Label it however you please," Whitfield remarked. "The outcome remains unchanged. You have a month to settle your dues or vacate the premises." Once the men had departed, Isabella and Matthias lingered in quietude amidst the remnants of their barn, clutching a piece of paper that signified the conclusion of all they had endeavored to create. The blaze had already wreaked havoc, yet this situation was even more dire. Unlawful execution that would obliterate them just as effectively as any noose. "We could take it to court," Isabella said at last, though deep down she understood the futility of it all. "From where will the funds come? Which lawyer are you referring to?" Matthias clenched the foreclosure notice tightly in his hand. "We find ourselves cornered from all sides." Yet, as Isabella gazed upon his vanquished demeanor, a fierce and radiant spark ignited within her heart. Did they really intend to eliminate her and Matthias? Did they intend to force them from their land and disperse them into the breeze? They would need to eliminate her first. "No," she declared, her voice gaining strength. "We persevere. We do not run. We discover an alternative path." "What alternative is there?" "I'm not sure at the moment, but we'll discover one soon enough." She grasped his hand, indifferent to the gazes of onlookers or the whispers that might follow. "Don't forget, we're in this together. Partners stand by one another during challenging times." After the fire, Matthias finally found a reason to smile. "Indeed, Les, you have a point. We are collaborators." As they stood amidst the remnants of their barn, gazing at the sun ascending over the Kansas prairie, Isabella quietly resolved to herself. No matter the obstacles or the time required, she was determined to discover a path to preserve their ranch and secure their future. The conflict had truly commenced, yet they remained steadfast, continuing to battle, united in their resolve. And that exceeded the expectations of their adversaries. The wedding dress displayed in the window of Peterson's general store ought to have been the most exquisite sight Isabella had ever encountered. Yet, it caused her Swilliamach to churn with a scheme so urgent it could potentially rescue them all. She leaned her face against the glass, examining the intricate lace and pearl buttons as her thoughts whirled through scenarios that would have felt unimaginable only weeks prior. "Are you considering tying the knot, miss?" The voice that reached her ears was that of Mrs. Henderson, the baker's wife, who had consistently shown kindness, even amidst the town's escalating rumors surrounding Isabella and Matthias. "Perhaps," Isabella responded, without looking back. When the right person inquired, Mrs. Henderson moved alongside her, directing her attention to the dress. "A ceremony like that would be truly beautiful. This could potentially address numerous issues for both you and Mr. Brennan." The words lingered in the atmosphere, beckoning softly. Isabella finally turned to confront the older woman, noticing a blend of empathy and shrewdness in her gaze. Mrs. Henderson recognized precisely the type of issues a wedding could address, and she certainly wasn't alone in her thoughts. "Is there any chatter about us?" Isabella inquired with caution. "Darling, people have been buzzing about you as well." Some people are expressing harsh opinions, while others are standing up for you with great passion. However, the chatter would cease if you were truly united in marriage. Isabella sensed a flush rise to her cheeks, yet she compelled herself to adopt a practical mindset rather than succumbing to her emotions. A union would formalize their partnership in the perspective of both legal standards and societal norms. It would position her as Matthias's legal counterpart rather than merely his assistant. Crucially, it could provide them with access to the resources they so urgently required. "Mrs. Henderson," she articulated with deliberate care, "what information do you have regarding women's property rights in Kansas?" The older woman's eyebrows arched in surprise. "That's quite an unexpected question for someone your age. We find ourselves in extraordinary times." Mrs. Henderson surveyed her surroundings to ensure their conversation remained private, then leaned in closer. "Kansas boasts some of the most forward-thinking laws in the nation. A married woman has the right to own property in her own name, sign contracts, and even operate a business independently of her husband's consent. What prompts your inquiry?" Isabella felt a surge of excitement as the elements of her scheme aligned perfectly. "Merely inquisitive. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson." She exited the general store, her thoughts whirling in a chaotic dance. If she were to marry Matthias, she wouldn't merely assume the role of his wife. She would assume the role of his legal partner, empowered to make financial decisions. And if she were his legal partner, she could tap into funds that Marcus Whitfield and his associates were unaware of. The journey back to the ranch felt like an eternity. Isabella discovered Matthias in the northern pasture, tending to their remaining cattle with the unwavering commitment of someone who would not surrender hope. The animals appeared more vibrant now, distanced from the tainted water. Yet only 41 heads remained, hardly sufficient to endure if all circumstances aligned flawlessly. "It's time for a conversation," she declared, stepping down from her horse with a bravado that masked her true feelings. Matthias raised his gaze from scrutinizing a cow's hoof. His face was etched with worry lines that appeared to grow more pronounced with each passing day. "Is there troubling news from the town?" "I believe I have some positive news to share. Or perhaps a notion that could blossom into something positive." With a steadying breath, she dove into her proposal, determined not to let hesitation take hold. Marriage as a collaborative venture, rights under the law that may safeguard them both, opportunities to explore resources they hadn't previously imagined. Matthias absorbed every word, his face a mask of neutrality. After she concluded, he remained silent for such an extended period that she started to question whether she had inadvertently upset him. He finally said, "You want to marry me to save the ranch." "I wish to marry you, for we are already partners in every sense but title," Isabella responded. "The ranch is merely a piece of the whole picture. What about the other part?" She locked her gaze with his, unwavering in the face of the intensity reflected back at her. "I have a deep concern for you, Matthias Brennan, more than I likely ought to, considering the circumstances of our meeting. However, I certainly do." A change flickered across his face, astonishment yielding to a deeper, more perilous warmth. "I'm aware that I have 15 more years of experience than you do. I carry with me shadows of the past, burdens of unpaid dues, and adversaries intent on our downfall," Isabella said. "I know you're the first person who ever made me feel like I mattered. Your honesty, kindness, and bravery shine through as you step forward to bid on a girl at auction, unable to bear the thought of her suffering. If we're going to take on this challenge, we should do it together and make it official." Matthias fell silent once more. Yet this time she could perceive the gears turning in his mind as he contemplated the practical ramifications of her suggestion. At last, a smile graced his face, the genuine smile that changed his whole expression and caused her heart to race. "Very well, my dear. If you are confident in your decision, then absolutely. I will marry you. Just like that. Just like that. However, we ensure that it is done correctly, complete with an authentic ceremony and witnesses present. I refuse to let anyone suggest that we acted in secrecy or engaged in anything dishonorable." The wedding occurred 3 days later in the quaint church at the town's edge, with Mrs. Henderson and Doc Chloe as witnesses. Isabella donned her finest dress, meticulously cleaned and repaired to the best of her ability, and held a bouquet of wildflowers she had gathered that morning. Matthias had borrowed a proper suit from the doctor, and he looked so dashing that she nearly lost sight of the fact that this was meant to be a practical arrangement. Reverend Owen, brother to Jake the auctioneer, conducted the ceremony with heartfelt sincerity, visibly delighted to witness a moment of positivity amidst the surrounding turmoil. As Matthias placed a modest gold band on her finger, Isabella sensed a profound change within her that transcended mere legalities or financial considerations. The Reverend declared, "You may kiss your bride." Matthias bent down and pressed his lips to hers gently, with a reverence that suggested she was a delicate treasure, fragile and deserving of the utmost care. Yet within that kiss lingered an additional sentiment, a vow that instilled in her the hope of a shared future. The modest gathering of supporters erupted in cheers, but their jubilant moment was abruptly cut short by the rapid approach of horses. Isabella gazed through the church windows, observing Sheriff Coleman and his men encircling the building. "Well, well," Coleman remarked as they stepped out of the church. "It appears we weren't able to attend the wedding." "How handy." "In what way is it convenient?" Matthias inquired, positioning himself defensively in front of Isabella. "How fortunate that you tied the knot right before losing all your possessions," Marcus Whitfield remarked, dismounting with a self-satisfied grin. "It raises questions about whether you're attempting to conceal resources from those you owe." Isabella stated with a composed demeanor that there were no assets to conceal. "As you are aware, given your relentless efforts to eliminate them entirely." Whitfield's smile wavered. "That's quite a grave allegation, Mrs. Brennan." "Mrs. Brennan?" The mention of the name sent a shiver down Isabella's spine, one she endeavored to conceal. "While that may be the case, it holds little significance now." "Is it insignificant?" Coleman chuckled. "Madam, you stand on the brink of losing it all. Your husband has a debt to the bank that exceeds the value of this ranch." Isabella concurred, saying her husband does, but she does not. She retrieved a neatly folded document from her reticule, a set of papers meticulously prepared by a lawyer in Dodge City, funded by the savings she had carefully accumulated since before the auction. "This morning, I officially became the legal owner of 41 head of cattle, acquired honestly from Matthias Brennan for the price of $1 each." The men gazed at her, caught in a moment of disbelief. Matthias appeared equally astonished, yet she could sense him starting to grasp the implications of her actions. "The cattle are mine now," she went on, "and as a married woman in Kansas, I have the authority to conduct business under my own name. This means that when the bank forecloses on the ranch, they will take the land and buildings, but the cattle will remain with me." "That's impossible!" Whitfield exclaimed, his voice trembling. "Indeed, I am capable, and I have accomplished it." Isabella offered a gentle smile to the men who had been harassing them for weeks. "My attorney guarantees that it is entirely lawful." Coleman's face flushed a deep shade of purple, a clear sign of his mounting fury. "You believe you're quite astute, don't you?" "I believe I'm a woman who has had enough of being pushed around by bullies," Isabella responded. "And I think you're about to find out that I'm much tougher to break than you thought." The sheriff and his men departed, grumbling under their breath with threats and curses, yet their authority had been shattered. Without the livestock, seizing the ranch would leave them with nothing but a barren plot rather than a thriving enterprise. The bank would acquire the land and structures, yet Isabella would possess the resources to begin anew elsewhere if needed. "What's the duration of your planning for this?" Matthias inquired, as they observed their foes vanish into the distance. "Since the morning, I understood that being sold at auction was the best thing that ever happened to me," Isabella replied, "as it led me to a man who viewed me as a partner rather than mere property. And now, we rise anew, united in our efforts." The rhythmic sound of hammering resonated across the Kansas prairie as Isabella secured the final nail into the doorframe of the new barn. A sound that signified hope had at last graced the Brennan Ranch after 6 months of the most challenging labor she had ever envisioned. Sweat trickled down her forehead as she took a step back to appreciate their creation, the freshly cut lumber glowing in the morning sunlight. "Not bad for a couple of amateurs," Matthias remarked, joining her with 2 cups of coffee and a smile that felt as natural as breathing. Isabella replied, "Speak for yourself," as she accepted the coffee with gratitude. "I have become quite skilled at constructing barns now." In a sense, it held some truth. Throughout the winter and spring, she acquired abilities she had never imagined she would require: carpentry, veterinary care, business administration, and a myriad of other skills that were far removed from the expectations of a proper lady. yet essential for being a true partner. The new barn, though smaller than the one they had lost to arson, was a testament to their hard work and determination. It was theirs, constructed with their own hands and funded by the money they had earned together. The cattle business flourished under Isabella leadership, and they managed to reclaim some of the land that the bank had attempted to seize. Madam Brennan? A young girl stood at the edge of their property, her voice trembling as she clutched a small bundle, her demeanor suggesting she was ready to flee at any moment. Isabella placed her coffee aside and approached the child, sensing the unmistakable signs of desperation and fear that she had once carried herself. The girl appeared to be no older than 14, her cheeks sunken, and her clothes worn from countless washes. "What is your name, dear?" Isabella inquired softly. "Lucy Mitchell. My father asked me to inquire if you have any opportunities for someone eager to learn." Isabella felt a tightness in her chest. She understood precisely what it meant to request work in a family enduring difficult times, parents facing daunting decisions, children thrust into an unpredictable future, hope and despair intertwined. "What type of projects are you interested in, Lucy?" "Everything. Tidying up, preparing meals, assisting with pets. I possess considerable strength for my stature, and I adapt swiftly to new information." In the background, Isabella noticed a man on horseback observing from afar. Clearly, Lucy's father is caught in a struggle between his deep affection for his daughter and the unforgiving truth of having too many dependents to support. She recalled that specific type of heartbreak from her own journey. "Matthias," she said, her gaze fixed firmly on Lucy. "Join us to welcome our new ranch hand." Her husband stood next to her, instantly grasping the situation unfolding before them. They had discussed this potential, considering the opportunity to offer other young individuals the same chance they had discovered together. "We could really use some assistance with the spring calving," he stated earnestly, recognizing Lucy for her abilities rather than viewing her as someone in need of assistance, as others might do. "The labor is challenging, yet the compensation is just. Accommodation and meals provided, along with monthly salary payments." Lucy's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you serious about that? Are you truly considering bringing me on board?" Isabella emphasized their sincerity. "However, there is a single stipulation." The girl's expression dimmed. "Which condition are you referring to?" "You correspond with your family on a weekly basis. Inform them that you are safe and in good health. You can drop by and see them anytime you wish. That's all there is to it." "That's all there is to it." As Lucy dashed back to share the exciting news with her father, Isabella sensed Matthias's arm gently encircle her waist. It was a gesture that had seamlessly woven itself into the fabric of their marriage over the months. Gone was the cautious courtesy of their initial collaboration, replaced by the comfortable warmth of two individuals who had selected one another in every significant aspect. "Are you considering what I'm considering?" he inquired. "Should we construct a suitable bunkhouse for the workers we plan to employ? Additionally, it might be worth considering an expansion of the main house as well." Isabella glanced at him, noticing a flicker in his expression that sent her heart racing. "What is the purpose of adding on?" "For the family we may wish to nurture in the future, if that type of collaboration piques your interest as well." The words lingered in the space between them, a promise poised for fulfillment. As time passed, their marriage evolved from a mere arrangement into a true partnership, blossoming into something profound and more beautiful than they had ever imagined. Yet they had never ventured into discussions about what lay ahead, aside from their efforts to preserve the ranch. Isabella expressed her interest with caution. One day," Matthias concurred, pressing a gentle kiss to the crown of her head. "We have the opportunity to work through this together." Visitors arrived in the afternoon, not the unfriendly type they had become used to, but rather friends and neighbors who had gathered to admire their restored barn and commemorate their achievement. Mrs. Henderson arrived with warm, freshly baked bread, while Doc Chloe shared the latest updates from town. Surprisingly, even some families who had previously distanced themselves during the height of the gossip came forward, extending gestures of friendship. James Crawford, a neighboring rancher who had lost half his herd to the same drought that nearly devastated them, mentioned that he heard you might be looking to hire more help. "My youngest son is on the hunt for a job," Isabella replied. "If you're interested, send it to him by William Morrow." Good people are always a valuable asset. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the prairie in hues of gold and amber, the visitors slowly made their way home. Lucy had made herself comfortable in the cozy little room they had arranged for her, crafting her first letter home under the warm glow of the lamplight. The cattle roamed serenely through the lush pastures, rejuvenated by the gentle touch of spring rains. "It's astonishing to think that just a year has passed," Matthias remarked while they relaxed on the porch swing, gazing at the stars emerging in the twilight sky. "Has it really been a year since the auction?" "It's been a year since I placed a $25 bid for a partner, and it turned out to be the best decision I ever made." Isabella chuckled, resting against his shoulder. "Just $25? I value myself at a minimum of $50 now, at the very least." They lingered in a cozy quiet, attuned to the nocturnal symphony of their flourishing ranch. A lone coyote's howl echoed through the stillness, a haunting sound that pierced the quiet of the night. Not the isolated, yearning sound Isabella recalled from her initial night here, but something more untamed and liberated. "Have you ever pondered their existence?" Matthias inquired softly. "Those who raised you, I mean." Isabella pondered the question. She had encountered her mother and father on a handful of occasions since the wedding, uncomfortable meetings steeped in remorse and phrases that failed to mend what was lost. They felt a deep sense of pride in her achievements. They spoke, yet the betrayal loomed between them like an impenetrable barrier that may never truly dissolve. "I've been considering the idea of forgiveness," she said at last. "Not overlooking their actions, but perhaps grasping the reasons behind them. I believe that might suffice for the time being. Forgiveness unfolds over time, rather than being a single instant." Insightful reflections from a knowledgeable individual. "A clever woman who once found herself treated like property," Isabella remarked with a hint of irony. "Astute individual who would not accept being confined," Matthias clarified, "who stood their ground and emerged victorious." As if drawn forth by their discussion, a silhouette emerged on the path toward their ranch. In the shadows, Isabella discerned the familiar outline of her father's slumped shoulders and uncertain steps. Levi Calloway made his way to the porch with the heavy demeanor of someone facing their fate. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Brennan," he stated with a sense of formality, taking off his hat. "Good evening, Pa," Isabella said, remaining seated on the swing. "I awakened, or rather, I desired to." Levi grappled with phrases that had been practiced, yet they still eluded him. "I wish to express my sincere regret for our actions, for treating you as if you were merely a commodity to be traded." Isabella spoke softly, conveying our desperation. "I see that clearly now. Desperation doesn't justify our actions towards you. You are our child, and we let you down." The phrases lingered in the darkness, reminiscent of a plea for forgiveness that may remain unanswered. As Isabella gazed upon her father's shattered form, a profound change stirred within her heart. Not quite forgiveness, but rather the first steps toward it. She conceded that you let her down back then. However, I did not let myself down, and that is what truly counts at this moment. Levi nodded, realizing that this was the closest to reconciliation he could expect. "What you've created is truly remarkable, a source of pride," Isabella stated, grasping Matthias's hand. After her father departed, they remained on the porch swing, gazing at the moon as it ascended over their land. Their land acquired through hard work and resolve, their future selected rather than dictated. Matthias inquired, without a hint of remorse. Isabella contemplated the question with great seriousness. A year prior, she was a girl stripped of choices, silenced, her worth measured solely by what others would offer for her work. Now she was a woman with a venture, a partnership, a horizon that unfolded before her like an infinite expanse brimming with opportunities. She finally declared, "No regrets. It doesn't pertain to any of that. Is it not even a matter of tying the knot with a headstrong Isabella Mon who has more debts than he has pennies? Particularly not regarding that." As they stepped inside to start yet another evening in the home they had created together, Isabella pondered the path that had led her to this moment. She had been sold by her own parents, purchased by an unknown buyer, and almost shattered by foes who could not bear to witness her triumph. Yet she had unearthed a treasure that no auction could ever claim and no foe could ever take away. Her value, assessed not in monetary terms but in bravery and resolve, alongside the affection of a good man, who recognized her true worth from the start. Certain tales commence with conclusions, and some conclusions are merely new beginnings in disguise. For Isabella Brennan, formerly Calloway, the girl who had been treated like property and transformed into a woman who would not be owned, this was both the conclusion of a journey and the dawn of a new chapter, expressed in her unique voice and experienced on her own conditions. As she drifted off to sleep in her husband's embrace, she realized that this moment held more value than all the riches in the universe.